Hey, folks, and welcome into episode 4 of the Longhorn Mailbag, answering your questions here on the Horns247 YouTube channel. We have a loaded show today, so let's go ahead and jump right into this one. Our first question from Numerel 2011. I hope I pronounced these right today. Do you expect the edge position to be more rotational at some point during the season between Ethan Burke, Jamon Tapp, Justice Finkley, or will it be likely named one guy with the other two splitting minimum plays after? Well, good question to start us off here. I think that this is a position where we will see a lot of rotation to start the season off so that we can get a feel for really who the hot hand is there. And then eventually one guy will stand out amongst the others, and that's going to be your starter going forward. But so far, through the three practices, excuse me, that we were able to see last week during fall camp and the media viewing time, we saw a lot of good stuff from Ethan Burke, and his teammates reflected that in player press conferences later on in the day. So I think right now Ethan Burke is your leader over there at that buck position opposite of Baron Sorrell. But you can't discount guys like Jamon Tapp and Justice Finkley. Finkley played in 12 games last season. He has a lot of experience under his belt. Jamon Tapp, we've heard a lot of good things about. He has a lot of potential too. So this might be a thing where in those first two games of the season, with Rice and Alabama being the biggest proving ground out of the first 2 weeks of the season, we see a lot of rotation. Maybe Ethan Burke starts the game off, but then Pete Kwiatkowski mixes in a couple of snaps with Jamon Tapp and Justice Finkley to see how they play out, especially like I mentioned, that week 2 game against Alabama, which I think across the board defensively for some position group battles, maybe even offensively, and we'll get to that a little bit later, will be where we sort of figure out who fits in where. Right now, like I mentioned, Ethan Burke seems to be the leader. But a lot can change, obviously, going into the next couple of weeks, and we'll hear what happens out of fall camp here as well in the coming days. All right, question number 2 from Back to the Top UT. Regarding the depth chart, is there a concern at any position where the productivity would drop enough to alter a season if a starter was hurt? Well, this answer, I'm going to go with the defensive line. And I talked a little bit about this in an earlier mailbag where I was mentioning a little bit of concern going forward for the depth of this Texas defensive line. If Baron Sorrell or Byron Murphy, God forbid, were to go out for the season, not be able to play, you can even add T'Vondre Sweat into that mix. I think you see a massive drop in productivity from that room. We'll start on the interior defensive line. If Byron Murphy or T'Vondre Sweat goes out, that means up next you've got Trill Carter, Alfred Collins, and Vernon Brockton. Those guys have been around for a long time. They have the experience, which is a good thing, but we haven't really seen enough from them, I think, in comparison to Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat, that could convince me at this point in time that them being put into a starting role is going to have the same impact or a better impact than Byron Murphy would have or T'Vondre Sweat would have right now. If you don't have either of those guys, frankly, I don't think the interior defensive line is that good. I think Alfred Collins and Vernon Brockton this season are great rotational pieces when you can't have Byron Murphy and T'Vondre Sweat on the field. Maybe they need a breather, but I don't think you can see them as being viable starting options if you want to have a good pass rusher, a good run stop. I think T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy are your best two guys, and if they go out, you see a little bit of a drop off with Alfred Collins and Vernon Brockton. And similarly on the edge, if Baron Sorrell was, for example, to go to the season, I think they lose their leader in that group, and the edge position is a little bit less deep. You have guys like Jamon Tapp and Justice Finkley who can get the job done, but there's no doubt about it that Baron Sorrell is the bell cow of that group, and he's the leader of that group, the veteran with season experience, came off a great season last year. If they lose him, it's going to be a lot more difficult with guys with limited snaps like Tapp, Finkley, and maybe two freshman guys who would get thrown into the mix like Colton Vosick, and it makes it a little bit more difficult. So defensive line, the position group that I'm going to go with there. Obviously, hope for no injuries across the board for Texas or any other teams going into the season. All right, our next question from JStew33. What would your prediction for the starting and second string offensive line be against Rice? Feels like two starting guard spots and backup center could see some movement over the next several weeks. Well, JStew33, you're definitely right that there could be a lot of movement on the offensive line over the next couple of weeks. So we'll keep an eye on that from fall camp. So these predictions are going to be right now at this point in time with what we know at the moment. So Rice is a game where, and again, no offense to my Owl fans out there, Texas should win fairly easily, which gives Kyle Flood the opportunity to mix and match along the offensive line, try a bunch of different starting fives out there. But when it comes to your ones and twos, this is how I would predict things line up. With the ones, I think it's identical to last year. You have Kelvin Banks, Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, Cole Hudson, and Christian Jones, because at this point in time, you have no reason to believe that those five won't work. It worked for him last year, and I think it works for him again to start the season off. Now, behind them with the twos from left to right, I think we're going to see Peyton Kirkland, Nato Omeozulu, Connor Robertson, DJ Campbell, and Cameron Williams. Now, like I said, there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching along the offensive line here. When it comes to changes that could be made, the two names that I'm looking at the most are DJ Campbell and Cameron Williams. I think those two guys are going to fight hard for spots, and it might be a little bit difficult to keep guys like them off the field in some way, shape, or form. So when it comes to those position battles, keep an eye on those two. And as an extra little, maybe cherry on the top here, Cole Hudson has been getting a lot of snaps at center, and we've talked about this in past mailbags. That's another thing to keep an eye on. Maybe he makes that move from guard to center, which would open up that guard spot for a guy like DJ Campbell to maybe slide in there. So we might be able to see a lineup that would be Kelvin Banks, Hayden Connor, Cole Hudson at center, DJ Campbell at right guard, and Christian Jones, or maybe Cameron Williams. So we'll see what moves are made here in the next couple of weeks. But for right now, those two that I mentioned before are going to be your ones and twos heading into week one with the current intel that we have. All right, our next question, and please forgive me, I'm probably going to botch this name completely. Paganar46 _ scout. What do you see shaking out at linebacker? Will linebacker plays on the over the side, Burke would start. This scares me. I can't envision Blackwell or Hill off the ball yet against the run, maybe as a Sam. Does Benda get the nod through week 2 versus Bama because of this? Now, those are Paganar46 _ scout scores, not mine, keep in mind. So to answer your question, I think that to start the year off, David Benda, similarly to that edge position that we were talking about earlier, is going to be your starter. He's waited his turn, and he's earned it, I think, deservedly so. That said, I think there's still a lot of questions surrounding what he can do and what he can produce for you. So those first 2 weeks, like I've said multiple times now already on this show, against Rice and Alabama are going to be your biggest proving grounds. And David Benda has those opportunities handed right to him to be able to show that he can be that starter over at will linebacker alongside Jalen Ford. Now, that's not to say that we won't see a lot of Maurice Blackwell and Anthony Hill through those first games as well. And even if David Benda is named the starter after week 2 or earns that starting spot at some point during the season, I don't think it's unfair to say that we will see a lot of Mo Blackwell and Anthony Hill nonetheless rotating in. Steve Sarkisian hasn't been shy about the fact that Anthony Hill is going to be there to rush the quarterback and really do a whole lot on the field as a freshman. So he's going to get a lot of snaps and earn his time. But I think that after that matchup in Tuscaloosa, we'll have a much better understanding of what each guy can do going forward, and that'll give us a better feel for who the guy will be at will linebacker. But right now, yes, I do think David Benda gets the nod as the starter through at least the first 2 weeks of the season. And our next question from Average Jack, greater of Anthony Hill sacks or Jalen Catalon interceptions? Well, speaking of Anthony Hill, as we just talked about him, I think I'm going to go with Anthony Hill sacks on this one. Steve Sarkisian, like I said, has not been shy that he wants Anthony Hill to come off the edge, get to the quarterback. He was so good at doing that in high school, had 8 sacks in his senior season, and I really like that part of his game. I think that's going to be a strong suit for him going forward. So I'll even give you an exact numbers prediction for the two here. I think Anthony Hill in year 1 finishes with 3.5 sacks, and Jalen Catalon gets you 2 interceptions in the secondary. That's a nice treat for you heading into the season. We'll see if I'm right. I'll track it as the season goes on. I'll clip this later, and we'll keep it in mind going forward. All right, our next question from Professor Biggs. Rewatching games from the 2022 season, you clearly see not only how effective Bijan and Roshan were, but also how powerful they were in breaking tackles. It's easy to understand when you consider both were in the 215 to 225 pound range. Other than CJ Baxter, do you see anyone in the running back room, including Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark, that will develop similar size and skills? Well, I think you can make a case for a lot of guys in this running back room having the ability to break tackles because Tashard Choice loves to recruit guys with strong lower bodies and a lot of speed, which can lead to a lot of broken tackles. I think you have that in the Texas running back room right now, and you have it coming in the future as well in the 2024 class in a guy like Jarrett Gibson. But let's take a look at the roster now and discuss Jonathan Brooks, who I think is a spitting image of what Tashard Choice is looking for. Last season, remember that he was playing behind Bijan and Roshan the entire time except for the bowl game. for 7 missed tackles and averaged 5.79 yards after contact in the regular season. That's good for second most among Big 12 running backs with at least 20 carries. So impressive numbers there in a season where he didn't get to touch the ball as much. Now, I'm not saying Brooks is going to force 104 tackles like Bijan Robinson did last season, but nonetheless, I think he has the ability and strength to do so. Plus, he's got a really good coach and Tashard Choice to help him out with that. Jared Gibson excites me a lot as well, the 2024 four-star running back commit for the Longhorns. I think he has the exact skill set that Choice is looking for, which is why he's a great fit and why Tashard Choice goes out of the state of Texas to land the top running back once again, like he did with CJ Baxter a cycle ago. And going into his senior season, he's already 5'10, 200 pounds. So there's room to grow with his frame. And no doubt the strength and conditioning program at Texas can get him in that playing shape that Choice is looking for. I know the question said other than Baxter, but you really do have to tip your cap to Cedric Baxter in this situation because he has the build too to be able to shake off defenders and run powerfully at 6'1", 218 pounds. There's a lot of depth in this running back room. There will be going into the future, but I don't think that that's news to anyone at this point. So there will still be a lot of runners in this Texas running back room that will have the ability to shake off defenders and be able to run through after contact. I don't know if anybody will do it at the level of Bijan Robinson or Roschon Johnson just yet, but that's a really high bar to set. So we'll see what we can expect here from Tashard Choice's group. All right, our final question of the day, ending with some recruiting here. From D. Kinnaman, over/under 6 of the following recruits commit to Texas. Colin Simmons, Dominic McKinley, Brandon Baker, Ryan Wingo, Wardell Mack, DeAndre Carter, Zeno Omeozulu, Danny Okoye, Kobe Black, and Solomon Williams. So for this one, I huddled up with Hank South and Jordan Scruggs, our Horns 24/7 recruiting analysts. And after picking their brains for a little bit, I'm going to go with either right at 6 or the over mark on this list. Now, a lot can change from now until signing day, so it's not a guarantee that 6 out of 10 guys or more will sign with Texas just because this is a evolving landscape that is recruiting. But at this point in time, and we're stating facts here, Colin Simmons, Dominic McKinley, Ryan Wingo, and Kobe Black all have at least one crystal ball to Texas. So I'm not saying it's a done deal for all 4 of those guys, and I'm not predicting that they're all going to be Longhorns either. But let's say hypothetically, if they all are Longhorns, I do think that Texas can get 2 more of those guys on the list at least, maybe 3 or 4 more. So at this point in time, I'm going with right at 6 or the over mark for those 10 guys that are listed here. That's going to do it for episode 4 of the Longhorn Mailbag. I want to thank you all for joining me today here on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Turn notifications on too so you can get notified when a new mailbag and other great content from our team at Horns 24/7 drops. And as always, head to horns247.com and keep an eye on our boards for next week's question drop thread to have a chance for your question to be answered in the next Longhorn Mailbag. For the rest of the crew, I'm Tommy Yarrish. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.